Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's Training Industry Leader Talk, the future of performance management, sponsored by InfoPro Learning, SweetRush, Allego, WhatFix, and the Regis Company. I'm Emma, a marketing associate here at Training Industry, and I'm so excited to have you here with us today. But before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to go over to help you get the most out of today's program. First of all, please feel free to use the chat to share your comments, and you can submit questions in the Q&A panel at any time. We'll address your questions during the session or during our live Q&A at the end. At the end of the session, a brief survey will pop open in your browser. We'd really appreciate your feedback, so please take a minute to complete that survey. And as always, all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com. And as an attendee, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to the on-demand recording and slide deck. If this is your first Training Industry event, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Training Industry's mission is to connect learning and development professionals with the insights, resources, and people they need to succeed. In addition to events like this one, we offer articles, research, magazines, conferences, and a podcast to support you in your role. And of course, if you're active on social media, we'd love to hear your takeaways from today's session. So please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and join the conversation. And now, without any further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speakers, Shiraj Malik and Nolan Hout from InfoPro Learning. Shiraj is the CEO of InfoPro Learning and a recognized voice on the workforce transformation and the human AI era. With over 20 years of experience in learning and talent development, he works with global organizations to align skills, strategy, and business performance. Nolan Hout is the SVP of Growth and an AI strategist at InfoPro Learning. He brings over a decade of experience helping organizations improve learning performance and drive measurable results with a strong focus on ROI and talent development. We're so glad to have you both here with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Emma.
Thanks, Emma. Pleasure to be here. And thank you for Training Industry for allowing us this opportunity to come and speak about this topic. We're really excited to have everybody on today. We're going to go through in about 45 minutes this session. Do want to open it up, as Emma had mentioned, for questions, comments. You can use the chat, you can use the Q&A, really whatever feels comfortable for you. We're happy to work with that. So let's go ahead and get into it to start with. So anytime I do a presentation that has to do with data or something that might seem complex on the outset, I created something, I've trademarked it, I haven't trademarked it, but maybe I should, called the Matt Damon Complexity Scale. And so what we do is we say, let's look at these Matt Damon in his roles as a cowboy, as a scientist, as a con man in Ocean's 11, or as an astronaut. Today, really, we're going to be talking at the left end of the spectrum. So don't worry if you're not a data scientist, if you're not an AI engineer, if maybe this is your first time ever hearing about data or understanding any of these concepts. Some of them might sound complicated, but we've done our best to simplify it so that you don't have to be an expert. And I think that's really the biggest job of us and those in this space is how do we make something that seems complex so simple? Starting with a very simple thing. Who is Nolan Hout? We all face this problem in our data today. This is actually the core, the origin of this whole webinar today and this whole solution that we have is who am I in the company? Now, I in the company exist in many different platforms. I have my HR platform that tells me how long I've been in the company. What is my pay? What have I been asked to do? What was the job description that I signed up for? What is my tenure? All of those things. And then we have the LMS, right? What courses am I taking? How am I developing my skills? Oh, it says my volume is low by two different people.
It's better now.
Oh, okay. I'll just hold it closer. So the second one is our learning systems, right? How are they progressing in their career? And then the last is performance. How are they doing on the job? Are they excelling? Are they selling what they should? Do they have a good net promoter score individually or customer satisfaction score? And the problem is that none of these things that tell us who Nolan Hout is speak to each other. So it's really hard to get a clear picture of who this person is. And if we don't know who they are, if we don't know them, it's very hard to grow them. And so there's three things that this results in by not knowing who our employees ask, or not employees ask. These are the three questions that we're always asked, right? So leadership is continually asking, what are the skills that we need to build, or what are the capability building, and how do we need to compete? Do we have the people? Are we competing? Where are our skills gaps, and how bad are they? Is there a big distance between where we need to be and where we are today? And then the third one is, what is our return on our investment? We're spending this money in developing our people. What is the outcome of that? These are questions that we've all heard routinely, which brings us to our first poll. Now, there's a lot of questions I know that are being asked. There's a fourth question that is very, very common. It's, what are we doing about AI? So I've intentionally left that off so that we're not going to skew the audience and have everybody rate that. So just answer, which of these questions is your leadership asking the most right now? Is learning building the capabilities we need? Where are our skills gaps right now? And what's the ROI of our investment in L&D? We're seeing a lot of answers come in. I'll give us another minute or so to fill those out once we see those responses are catered off. Right now, actually, I'm seeing some live results. It's pretty evenly split. We're seeing about a third across everything, which is great. I mean, a lot of times that tells us that these are the three questions. People are answering all of them. We're being asked all three of these. But right now, as I can see, we'll go ahead and end the poll because we're starting to see a clearer winner, which is, where are our skills gaps right now? Which makes a lot of sense. The skills conversation has become paramount in a lot of future-proofing of organizations. And with so much volatility, a lot of organizations are recognizing that a skill can be a foundational layer to help determine how good an employee can be at scaling the organization. So that really became the far winner here. I'll share the results for just a second. And we saw those. Okay. Now the question, or the problem is that those questions, many L&D functions can't answer them, but it has nothing to do with a not wanting to, or for a lack of attempting to solve those problems. But the reality is, it's not a talent problem. It's not a budget problem. It's not an AI problem. It's a structural problem. And those structural problems require a structural solution. So what are those problems? The first one is the first point that I talked about. A lot of our systems are fragmented. We don't know who Nolan Hout is in the company. It is hard for us to determine a real ROI of learning if we're not given access to what Nolan does. And we're not able to connect those dots to, okay, when I gave Nolan this program or this event or delivered him this thing, what happened down the chain? Second one is a really big one, L&D analytical gaps. We were Sriraj and I were talking to the old CLO of one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, and she said, listen, a big reason that these problems exist, specifically the skills gaps, is they just aren't near, like, we're one of the more funded L&D organizations. We actually have an L&D analytical person on our staff, but these are super expensive people. And a lot of companies want that person, but they can't get to that expertise. So that's a really big one as well. Third, and I think a fairly big one, is the systems that we do have, the systems that learning is given control of, are focused on completions and scores. They're not focused on outcomes. It's what activity happened, not what outcome happened. And a lot of the data that we have is built to react. We talked about, skills gaps, right? It's what happened. Where are the gaps? What happens today and what's coming next? We don't really have data for learning that was built to predict, to help be proactive and recognize those problems before they exist. And then this fifth problem came up, has been exacerbated recently. Every platform promises AI and none deliver that without context. All of this intelligence, again, is only living in one system. Now, the instinct, especially recently, has been to add more tools, right? We've built LXPs, we've built data warehouses, we've built skills assessment tools that are all trying to get to this grail of answering these three questions. But tools that are built on this broken foundation of data living in these other areas that aren't connected, it just gives you faster access to the wrong answers. And AI has exacerbated this problem. It's accelerated this problem because we're now able to get more things out there. But then how do we sort through all of this data in a meaningful way? And that's what Sriraj is here to talk about. I'm glad that he's here to talk about it because this was the easiest part of the whole thing. What Sriraj is going to do is take us through what the foundation looks like to answer these questions. Now, it's a really important caveat I want to point out here. InfoPro Learning is not, and as Sriraj is sharing some slides here, important to say we're not selling a product. What you're looking at here, everything we're talking about, this isn't a SaaS tool. This isn't a solution. We didn't say, the answer is is not to buy more tools, and then we sell you a tool. This isn't a tool. This is a strategy. This is a strategy that any of you can take back and implement right now. I do want to call that out because I think sometimes the hesitancy is to think, oh, they're coming on, they're going to present this problem, and then, we're going to have to buy their software. You have what you need to answer these problems today in many different ways, and Sriraj is going to show you how.
Thank you, Nolan. So if more tools are not the answer, like Nolan was saying in the last slide, then what is? And what we have understood from our experience working with different learning leaders and organizations is this is an architectural conversation. What you actually need is a layer that sits between the systems you already have and the decisions you need to make. And we in InfoPro call it the intelligence layer. So on the left side, you will see all your existing systems, your learning management systems, the completion rates, enrollment rates, etc. You also have your HRIS. Nolan was talking about who is Nolan, and a lot of information about who is Nolan sits on your traditional HRIS data. Some of you would also bring in your performance systems, whether you're driving KPIs, balance scorecards, OKRs, that data comes in. And then all of us are right now in some way or form at some stage of implementing or using the skills data and hoping that once we become a skills-based organization, we are going to link it to mobility and we are going to link it to learning and so on and so forth to get its benefit. So we have all these systems on the left, and on the middle is what we call as the intelligence layer. And there are three components to this intelligence layer. I'll explain that in the next slide. But on the right-hand side, therefore, what data gets passed through this intelligence layer, therefore, on the right-hand side gives you the strategic answers. They map directly to the three questions that Nolan started this conversation with around capability visibility, predictive gap identification in your organization. There were 44% of the people who voted today voted on, well, where are the biggest skill gaps and where are the opportunities for learning leaders to work on? And finally, for our CLOs and head of talent development, what ROI, what outcome are we bringing to business, and can that be causal in nature? Right? So those are the three things we are all driving towards. So the way to think, I was thinking about this, the way to think about this is you have all these ingredients, but we are just missing a kitchen that can bake this into a nice dish. And so that's what we intend to do. And I'm going to now talk about what each one of those three components do, the digital twin, the semantic layer, and the synthesis engine. What really happens is once you plug in your data into this intelligence layer, we have to process it through three systems. And that's our point of view. You can maybe simplify it, but to reach those three answers, there are three systems that the data needs to be nurtured by. The first one is what we call as a digital twin of the individual, of the team, and the organization. And so what we snapshot there is it becomes like a living profile of each person in your organization, not just a static HR record. It is not just a self-assessment of someone who filled a form once in a year or whatever the cycle is. What we are really capturing is to know this person. And Nolan started this session with who has Nolan Hout? Identity, role, tenure, aspirations, capabilities, trajectory, how are they moving, in what direction, what their aspiration is to grow. All this information already is available in these systems that I spoke to you in the previous slide. And so from what they can do to, what's happening right now in their life, like what are their recent blockers, what was the last feedback, and any interaction that helps them learn the best. So those are the things the digital twin captures. It's very important because this is the context, and without this context, you will not get the outcomes and the output that you require. So let's take an example where a senior executive asks a question: who's ready to step into the regional director role? And before you put together a spreadsheet and work over different elements and joins, the digital twin should be able to answer you, because it has the capability set, it has the trajectory set, and it has the right context to tell you who can be best suited for this with this regional director role. Now, that helps you in internal mobility, that helps you in many other decision making, but that's one example. The second box in the middle is about the semantic layer. We also call it part of the ontology. And why this is important is what happens is your learning management system could be calling something like a leadership development program, but your HRIS system would be calling the same capability people management, but your performance management system would be tagging it as team leadership. Same skills, but different names. And you need a map, something that the system can rationalize and tell this and tell all the reports that, well, this means the same. Workday, as an example, would use user ID, or Cornerstone would use employee _ID, or another platform would just use UID. They all mean the same thing, but the system does not know. So the semantic layer is the mapping of making sure that each one of these are understood and spoken for when you get the report.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the more complicated just thing to kind of wrap your head around. But the good news is that work is traditionally done by a data analytics person. I think the big concept is just to grasp with that semantic layer is just we get data from all these different sources, and all these data sources speak a completely different language. All we're trying to do is to say what language should this data speak so that it can all be translated into the synthesis engine that Shiraj is going to talk about.
Correct. Well, before this webinar, Nolan reached out to me and said, don't make it too complicated. Yeah. So thank you for that reminder, Nolan. Basically, he wanted me to explain things in a simpler way, because many of these topics are for the technology folks, the data science folks. And then finally, you have the synthesis engine, because you need correlation between different data sets, where you have in level 1 simple observable facts like 42% of your supply chain managers lack Lean Six Sigma certification. Simple reporting. But level 2 is cross pattern recognition or correlation. The gap is concentrated in APAC region. It correlates to 15% higher defect rate in those facilities. Or in level 3, where you have to start doing prediction, right? So if no action is taken, this gap will hit your Q3 product launch. So how can you make sure that the intelligence layer already has the data, but has the capability to synthesize and do these kind of, you execute these kind of use cases that you have been asking for. And so when you implement the intelligence layer, what comes out is the answers to those 3 questions, where the starting point is what your team sees when they log in on Monday morning is the 3 views depending on their roles. One could be the learner intelligence, skill profiles, trajectories, readiness scores. On the right-hand side, you see a sample of a skill profile as an example. Your L&D admin team would like to look at patterns of enrollment, compliance, proactive issue detection, etc. And operational intelligence would like to look at what is the delivery quality, what is the vendor performance, what is the cost per outcome. And all of those are pre-packaged or dashboards and reports and analytics, that are fairly available, that can be rolled up quickly. So you don't have to spend a lot of time developing those from ground zero. Now, when we go to the next capability, you have to now look at what does synthetic intelligence produce for you. So all these sources give you one view, and therefore what you now see is combining data from multiple sources and to answer a question no single system could have answered, like capability forecasting. How many people can develop the skills by Q3? That answer itself requires skill levels from the digital twin, that box, learning velocity from the completion data from your LMS, and role requirements from your HRIS. Not a single system, but 3 systems that are then captured together, synthesized to give you that answer, right? And similarly, you see investment to outcome conversations, or workforce readiness initiatives like, are we ready for this initiative? What are the gaps? The bar chart you see on the right-hand side, it shows you the current proficiency level versus projected Q3 proficiency across 4 capability areas. And the purple is where you are. The gap between them is where our action plan sits. So that is what changes the conversation with leadership. You stop reporting on activity and start answering strategic questions with this data. And that's how powerful the intelligence layer can be if implemented with all these capabilities. And so finally, an interesting topic, all of you and most of you, I assume, use ChatGPT, Claude, or different AI tools. What is possible, easily possible now, is you have the ability to talk to your data using natural language queries. On the right-hand side, you see natural language query. Are we ready for a Q3 product launch? And the system would come up with very specific answers. And the reason is that we take the intelligence layer and we model it in a way and create hooks so that any co-pilot you use in your organization or Claude or ChatGPT can integrate with that hook. And now it allows you to just talk and get information right at the point of need. So it's very empowering to not only learning leaders, but also learning operational leaders, and also to learners who would want to check what are the gaps I have in my capability to reach this level of promotion. And that's very powerful. We are seeing a lot of advances in how AI can capture this data and how AI can start modeling it for you. And basically now you're speaking to someone and getting what you need right at the time when you need it. So those are the...
And there were some questions in the chat, Shrush. I'm just going to pause you for a second about that last slide, and I can share my screen. But what the question was really like, well, is this owned by a data analytics person? Like, this seems very complex, but I think this is, when you look at, I don't think you're allowed legally to have a webinar without talking about AI. This is really where AI comes into play, is it says, data analytics is absolutely needed to kind of build that semantic, that layer that we talked about, and help just determine, get all the data into the right place and make sure that it's saying the right things. It also, data analytics can also help you build a visual if you want to see it, to answer, most of the questions. But what AI is doing is it is giving you answers to these questions that you don't need to go ask an analytics person, hey, what is the biggest component? What is the biggest variable to success within my company? Somebody asked a question that answered, like, what data is the most significant in a company? Well, we don't know that, but that's a great question to ask your data. Is, if I invest in sales training for $100,000, what is the impact going to be?
Hmm.
That's a real question that you can ask. You don't need an analytics person. You don't need a technical background. You just need to have that business knowledge.
That's right.
So um, I'll take it back over here. So the three questions we talked about. Let's just kind of bring it back in. So is learning building the capabilities we need to compete, right? On the left, we said, this is the world that we have today. Skills data self-reported. A lot of times we don't trust, what it is. Learning and performance data live in separate systems. I don't know if your organizations are anything like ours, but a lot of times when we go back to our clients, and it's usually when we're submitting a Braden Hall Award. The fifth question is, and what was the impact on the business? A lot of times we're going back to get that answers because we have to. We don't have access to that. Big problem. And the best answer is really like we can answer completions. And if somebody said, how did it go? We can tell them what happened in it, but not what was the outcome of it. And with the foundation, skills are validated because we have multiple sources that are validating those skills, not just one person. Skills development is connected in real time. We're not having a gap between what training did we do and then how long did it take us to get that data and get back to that answer. And L&D can show which programs drove capabilities, as I just mentioned, in the sales program. The big question, where's our skills gap? Right now, this is just how it lives today, right? A skills gap exists, but nobody knows it. Project gets kicked off, performance suffers, then, we have this gap. Let's go ahead and close that. Too late. Two, we see that we have this really big gap. We understand that Nolan Hout is being tasked to do this project. Well, he doesn't have the skills required to do that job. Let's develop those skills ahead of time. Now the project is launched here, and our team is ready because we've already got insight into what the business is planning, what skills we need, and we've developed those skills. And what's a return on investment, right? Super hard. We've tried to do this in so many different ways. End of the day, it's just really hard to get the answer to this unless you have your data connected so that you can start drawing correlations between an investment in this person and their outcomes. Really hard to get answers to this. And a lot of it is because it's such a moving target. It's hard to trust that data versus the environment. And this is really where having data not just as a person, but data from a company as part of the intelligence is really key. So I think a lot of people might be asking themselves, like, okay, this is really cool, but where would I even start? That's a really good question. I think something to keep in mind. What Sriraj and I are showing you, I think, is let's call it like an end state. Like if you implement this really well, a year from now, where will you be? You'll have that insight at your fingertips. You will have known what questions to ask. But really, you can get very far in 90 days. The very first thing that we have to do is to connect our data. We have to integrate these data feeds. And what we say is start with data that's easy for you to get to. And I'll show you what that means in a couple slides. Even if all you have is LMS data, let us show you the power of adding additional intelligence on top of that, right? Many large organizations we work with have 6, 7 to 8 different LMSs. Their learning lives in so many different environments. But that is the first thing, is you have to connect your data and establish a confidence score of how good is this data. Then we look at piloting. We start running a project of, okay, let us see, we believe that if we invest in this, we should get this result. Let's see if that actually happens. And then in the last stage, that now we're expanding it. We're saying, okay, this really worked. Let's go get these other data sources. We now can prove to our board that, look, we were able to go from not being able to predict how this investment in training was going to have a result of sales performance, customer service, retention rates for leaders, whatever it should be. Now let us, that buys me access to these other data sources so that I can start compounding this intelligence. And I think that's the really word that I want to end on, is connecting your data and cleaning your data, and then building intelligence on top of your data. It's a lot like that quote they say when planting a tree. You're like, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. If you do this today, since you'll get more data every day, like every day from now on, you will have more data. Your AI will be learning better about the questions you're asked, what you're asking it to do, what answers worked, what didn't work. So within a year, you would have built a program that is a competitive advantage for your company because
Right.
everybody else that
Nolan,
okay.
just to add to that, today's answers to the situation is far more easier than it was even a year back and 2 years back. Just because there's maturity in technology and most companies already have the infrastructure, they just need some direction, some support on how to use that infrastructure to execute. But most of this is becoming fairly available because it's becoming easier for implementation. And that's why we see a lot of engagements where we are working with clients who are in some stage of this adoption.
Yeah, and that is invisible. I think, in this presentation we didn't get into it, but all of your data, like the making data speak the same language or synthesizing the data to get a good answer, those two things were nearly impossible. Like they were incredibly hard to
Yeah.
do 4 or 5 years ago. Even as late, like every month, it is getting exponentially better, not incrementally better, exponentially better. And
Mhm.
so this project that used to take a year for a company to build a data warehouse and billion-dollar industries existed because of it are kind of shrinking. We just saw Oracle announce their big layoffs, like because this is becoming so much easier to do. So I'm going to show just a couple examples. I mentioned, Shiraj showed some slides of kind of what happens when you combine data. I wanted to just show a couple samples of what that data looks like, what kind of dashboards we've built for some people. And again, this is not a product. What you're looking at is not a product screen. It is a solution that we created for an organization. What you're looking at here is a total look at a company's leadership pipeline. They wanted to say, where do my employees exist and where do they sit at these different stages? What is their likelihood to transition, or what is the rate of transition from high potential the first time? What is my attrition within this layer? Where do I have problems here? Where am I lowest investment? What's my time to rate? These types of things are all answered when we can combine some of these data sources. But then we also have things I mentioned, you don't have to start with the end. Like you don't immediately go from walking to running a marathon. This is an example of what happened when we just took the learning data. When we just said, let us do nothing else but combine all of the learning data that you own into one place. And let us give you instant answers to these things that you might be asked. Whether that's how many learners are active or engaged, what is the effectiveness metrics of my learning? What is my skill demo pass rate, right? When I'm developing these skills, how many people actually pass when they have to go to the next skill rate? What is my time to proficiency? What is my ROI? What is my certification pass rate? So it doesn't always have to be, and we don't always advocate for coming in and trying to plug in 1,000 different data sources and get all of these answers. A lot of times you can just start with, let's just take a look at combining the data you already own. And I mean, all this data you already own. You don't have to go out and buy anything. But this is just the data that maybe other teams don't want to give you access to their systems. Understandable. Let's at least get your learning data and make heads or tails of it.
Sure.
So
Nolan, Susan just asked a question. I'm just seeing
yeah.
this. Do you believe qualitative data or quantitative data is better used together or separate? I feel like the infrastructure that we showed and the solution we are saying requires it to be together. The what data, what's happening, is one layer of the answer, and then the why data, which is qualitative in nature, it actually then primes you to do a lot more what if scenario planning. Why is it happening, right? Which is why when we talked about the digital twin or having an employee manifest, right, that goes into deep qualitative elements of why is this trend happening and what's behind this quantitative data, what's the answer to this question. So I feel like they both go together and should be solved as such.
Yeah. Thank you, Shiraj. And please, if you have questions, please put those in the chat. We want to make sure that we get to as many as we can. I'll just end on this. This is a intelligence workshop that we offer to a lot of our clients who, if you walked away from this presentation thinking, one of two things, like either, um, yeah, like I absolutely agree. I want to plant that tree today. This is a great place to start. This is a half day session, but it honestly just starts with like a phone call. Like let's just have a conversation and understand where you are. But then we can dig into a deeper workshop with your team if we like that. Or maybe you're at this point where you're saying, I'm still confused. Like I'm wildly confused at what you just talked about. Schedule a session with us one on one, and we'll walk through those specific questions that you have. We understand that in this journey, there's people at all stages in this journey. I think what we wanted to do in this presentation was kind of shed light to the importance of data and how that will drive the future of L&D. I think a lot of us are getting kind of caught in this idea of not knowing what to do next because the world is changing at such a quick and fast pace, and it kind of almost locks us into a box. The reality is, though, your data is constant. Now, what's happening to that data, the sources of that data might change here and there, but if you have instant access to your data, you can actually read in real time what is happening. And then you can start leveraging the power of these new tools to expand on that. So the data isn't going to change. It's there. I mean, the dashboards, the reporting, that lives within your systems. It helps you bring a little bit more consistency in a world that is less consistent. So this is really good for those organizations that are struggling with AI implementation. Maybe you've got AI in a lot of different silos and you're unable to compound on that. Maybe you're trying to do a skills-based implementation and you've got some data that lives in, whatever, Skill Jar and Docebo and Cornerstone, and you don't really know how all that's going to combine to create valuable learning programs. Whatever it is, a lot of your answers are easier to be set in data. So with that, again, if there's any questions, I'm just kind of looking to see it through. But one of the biggest questions, Raj, that I always hear is like, what are the roadblocks that prevent this from happening? When we're talking to organizations, if I did say, yes, this sounds super exciting,
Yes.
where
Lot,
do I get hit the
yeah.
first?
Yeah, a lot of common themes here that everyone will experience, especially with the IT team and with the cybersecurity team. One is companies have very strict policies around sharing their data, like PII as an example, and they work in a high compliance environment, whether it is GDPR or whether it is HIPAA and other compliances. And so, but they have solved this problem for other domains, other verticals within their infrastructure, supply chain, e-commerce. They have solved the intelligence and data problem. So they have the infrastructure. What we need to do is have a communication with them that this could sit in their infrastructure, not sit out of the infrastructure. So you remove one big problem like, am I going to give this data to some external entity? Well, if you cannot because the structure prevents you or you have strict compliance and security requirements, your organization must have built some kind of data lake, must have built some kind of infrastructure. All we need is to give you these building blocks, these pre-packaged analytics reports, these building blocks that will then allow you to quickly get to those end state use cases like analytics, dashboards, or your own co-pilot, as an example, could be using it. So the first roadblock you will get is, well, I can't give this data to anyone, even if we agree that we need to do this. And therefore, we need to make sure that the intelligence layer needs to be built within your infrastructure and cannot sit outside. That's one common, pushback that we've heard, and that's how we have solved it.
Yeah, and so to make that very clear, what Shiraj is talking about here is when you implement these solutions, the data is not leaving your company. which usually becomes kind of the biggest sticking point, is this data at no point comes to InfoPro Learning, or whoever, like anybody, for that matter. Like most of your organization would actually have these tools already built, and the data is already existing. All you're doing is you're just connecting the data. So you're not doing stuff with, you're not exposing more risk to the data itself. And that was a big part of when we created these solutions, what we wanted to focus on, because a lot of our work is at enterprise scale, who has fairly strict compliance regulations, a lot of work in pharmaceutical and life sciences. And that's why we designed, or that's why when we thought what would be the easiest path forward, it's to just take what you have and expand on that.
There's one more question, Nolan. I think Susan has asked, what's the best argument statement that supports human intelligence over AI knowledge and skill implementation within L&D environment? Not saying AI is better or worse, just that AI is in the emergent phase of growth right now. Best argument or statement. Well, before AI, it was just human intelligence. So we are now getting used to artificial or synthetic intelligence now. But let's take this example of skills data. So there are these two worlds. One world is where there's a lot of excitement that will infer your skill. In reality, all synthetic inference are unvalidated, and you can't simply depend on that data, right? So you need human in the loop. So in that one use case, as an example, Susan, I would say validation of skill is a critical component, especially if you are in a high compliance industry, because inferred data on skills are still not proven and they are not correct always. So there is a lot of dependency in, as an example, if you're looking at skills to be the foundation of every decision you make, to have human in the loop and use that as an intelligence.
Yeah, and I think that a big part of human intelligence was centered on like a gut feel. And I think that's what we're trying to move away from, is that gut feel of, we believe. And I think there's a lot of people that logically draw the gap between, if I invest in my leadership training, my company will be better. I should see a drop in attrition, or I should see an increase in engagement. And so I think we kind of have these hunches. But the problem, I think, happens is when we all agree on that, but there's not a dollar figure attached to it. And I think a lot of times that becomes a big part of that data problem, is it misses dollar signs. There's this famous quote by this guy who worked and was an early detector of the housing crisis. And he was a rocket scientist. And they said, why did you go from like one of the brightest engineers, rocket scientists, to financials? And he said that I realized that nobody cared about numbers unless they had a dollar sign in front of them. And that's always, like, I always hold that very true to everything that I do. And so I think if I were to answer what is the biggest difference between like human intelligence and AI powered, is I think AI powered gives you that ability to predict and to answer really quickly of how do we put a dollar sign next to this investment. And with that, we're at the end of our session today. I really want to thank Training Industry for giving us this platform to speak, all of you for your engagement in this session. It's been incredibly well received. Emma, thank you for helping us moderate throughout this as well. I've put you've got my email in there, and I've put a link if you want to schedule some time with me and Sriraj to evaluate this further. But we really appreciate everybody's time and attention today.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both so much. I'm seeing some hearts and claps, emojis coming through. That was a great session. And thanks to our attendees for their participation and for attending this event today. We have a 15-minute break up next. We'll see Lena Finch for their session with Allego, how leading organizations are refining performance management. I hope you all stick around for that next session. It will begin at the top of the hour. And for that, that's it for this session, and I'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.